Today, you'll learn English with the news. We'll read a news article on Saudi Arabia's dilemma as it gets dragged into the war in the Middle East. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. Our headline, Saudi Arabia faces a dilemma as it gets dragged into a war it has desperately tried to avoid. First, let's talk about dilemma. This is a noun. It means a difficult decision or a difficult choice, usually among two options. Now here, the collocation is face. This is the verb that pairs well with dilemma. Now, dilemma is a noun, so that's why we have this article, a dilemma. You can face a dilemma. You can also have a dilemma. I have a dilemma. If I accept the job, I have to move to a different city and leave my family and friends, but it's a great opportunity. That's a difficult choice. It's a dilemma. Now, of course, your verb face, have, you have to conjugate it. So here it's in the present simple, conjugated with Saudi Arabia, it. It faces a dilemma. As it, Saudi Arabia, gets dragged into a war. Do you understand the meaning of drag into? You can always look to context to understand. Dragged into a war. Forcibly enter an unpleasant situation. Now, of course, in this case, it's a severely unpleasant situation. You can use this in more of an everyday context. I got dragged into the meeting. It means you didn't want to go to the meeting, but in some way you were forced. You could have been forced simply because your boss said, oh, come to the meeting. If your boss says, come to the meeting, you go to the meeting, even if you don't want to. I got dragged into the meeting this morning. As it gets dragged into a war, so you get drag is your phrasal verb. Drag is your verb that you conjugate, and it's a phrasal verb because you have a preposition into and then something. I got dragged into a meeting. Now notice it's to get dragged into, because get represents that transition from not dragged to dragged. If it's the active verb, you could say, my boss dragged me into a meeting this morning. As it gets dragged into a war, it, Saudi Arabia, has desperately tried to avoid. Now, avoid is a gerund verb, so if you had a verb after this, it would be in the ing form. Saudi Arabia has avoided entering the war. So if you use a verb, it would be the ing form. Don't worry about taking these notes. I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Now let's keep reading. Saudi Arabia is facing a difficult dilemma. So we already talked about the collocation, which is face, and then dilemma is the noun. You have a. This is the article that matches with the noun dilemma. So we have article, adjective, which describes the dilemma. Just remember, adjectives don't replace articles. So you still need the article that goes with the noun. A dilemma. What type? A difficult dilemma. Now, of course, your verb has to be conjugated, which we talked about before. Headlines often use the present simple. However, in the body of the article, you will choose the verb tense based on the time reference. Saudi Arabia is facing the present continuous because it's taking place now, is facing a difficult dilemma, a difficult choice or decision. Ever since the US and Israel launched their war on Iran on February 28th, the Saudis, so this is the plural form to refer to all people in Saudi Arabia, Saudis. The Saudis, the people of Saudi Arabia, the Saudis, have largely tried to stay out of it. So to stay out of it, what's the it? Of course, the war. So to stay out of means to not enter. So try to stay out of it. But now, after being attacked from three sides, the Saudis have had enough. So here, this is a very useful expression. To have enough conjugated in the present perfect. I've had enough. We often use this when we have faced many challenges or many problems, and then there's this point where we cannot continue. We have to address those challenges or problems, or we have to do something about it. Parents often use this with their kids' behavior. So if your kid is acting up, maybe constantly asking you for ice cream and you say no, 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 and then at some point, maybe the punishment becomes more severe when you say, I've had enough. You will not tolerate that anymore.
Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson.
This week, they carried out joint strikes with the US on Iranian proxy militias in Iraq, who they believe have been launching drones at the kingdom. So here, to understand who the subject is, you always have to refer back to the last identified noun. This week, they. So if we look back at the last identified noun, it's the Saudis. So the people of Saudi Arabia. So it would either be the Saudis or just Saudi Arabia. This week, they carried out. So they would be the people of Saudi Arabia, Saudis, because it's plural. Because the place Saudi Arabia would be conjugated as it carried out. So because we have they, we know it's actually Saudis, which is plural. This week, they carried out, so initiated, they carried out joint strikes. So joint means in partnership with. So here we have the with, the US on Iranian proxy militias in Iraq. So this is who's receiving the joint strikes and the location in Iraq. Who they, again, they would be Saudis, they believe have been launching. So our present perfect continuous. It started in the past and it continues until now. So it suggests they haven't just done it once, they've done it multiple times over a period of time. And that's why it's very important to choose your verb tense specifically, because it conveys information, it communicates information. Have been launching drones at the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. For Saudi Arabia, the dilemma, so again, this is our noun. Before we saw it as a dilemma, which means any, but now they're going to specify it. So we have the dilemma. We have a specific dilemma, which is why we have the. So the represents specific and a just means any dilemma. But remember, dilemma is your noun, so that's why you need an article with it. For Saudi Arabia, the dilemma, now, so here, they're going to list the dilemma. So we know you need two choices, whether to keep on hitting back. So to hit back means to strike back. So if someone hits you, well, then you hit back. But of course, we're not talking about our fists. We're talking about military power. And in this case, it sounds like drone strikes. Whether to keep on hitting back as a deterrent. A deterrent comes from the verb to deter. So this is the noun. It's a thing, a deterrent. But the verb to deter means that you do something to try to prevent an unwanted behavior or situation. So as a deterrent, so they're only striking back, hitting back to try to stop an unwanted situation. Or, so this is a dilemma, or whether to try to de-escalate. So escalate means to increase. So to de-escalate means to decrease in terms of the severity, the intensity of the situation, or try to de-escalate the situation. And of course, the situation is the war. or more specifically, the fact that Saudi Arabia is now a target in the war and has been receiving these drone strikes. Perhaps by, so how are they going to de-escalate, make the intensity of the situation less severe? Perhaps by paying off some of the adversaries. So an adversary is your enemy, basically, your opponent. It doesn't have to be an enemy, because you can have an adversary that's just an opponent. So an opponent, an enemy, you could think of it as that. To pay off. Pay off means that you give someone money, but because you want them to either do something specific or not do something. So basically, you're going to pay them to stop launching drones at you. So that's how they're going to de-escalate it. Let's keep reading. There are a number of reasons why Saudi Arabia is trying not to get sucked into a full-scale conflict. Okay, so here, get sucked into. Sound familiar? What was the word we learned before? Dragged into. Get dragged into. When Saudi Arabia is forced to enter a situation and they don't want to, just like your boss says, oh, come to the meeting. And you don't want to, but you have to. So drag into, sucked into, basically the same. To unwillingly enter a situation. So here, suck, this functions as the adjective, but it is a verb to suck. It's what a vacuum does. So a vacuum sucks the dirt. And if there's a vacuum going, the dirt nearby is going to enter the vacuum. So you can think of that as if you are near a situation and you get sucked into it, you enter the situation. So if your friends are debating something and it's getting intense and you're just in the same room, you might get sucked into the debate. And then you have a dilemma because you have to choose sides. And you don't want to be there, but you're literally in the room, so you're forced into that situation. So get sucked into, you could also say get dragged into a full-scale conflict. They're both commonly used. Remember, this is the passive form because the verb they're using is get. You can also use the verb to be. Not to be sucked into. Now, sucked and dragged before, they are verbs, but in this case, they're functioning as the participle form because it's the passive. And then into is your preposition that you need to connect the noun. The noun is a full-scale conflict. Again, if you use the active form, you could say the drone attack sucked us into the conflict. Let's keep reading. Its de facto ruler, so it's being Saudi Arabia. Now, de facto is Latin, so you might be familiar with it. It means that this is happening in reality, even though it isn't official by title or law. So Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler, the relatively young crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, has embarked the country on a course known as Vision 2030. So embarked the country on a course. So he has set the course, or he has set the vision, ironically, as Vision 2030. So embark on is a more emphatic way of saying start working towards a goal, but we use this in a more grand vision, one that requires more long-term thinking or planning. His aim is another way of saying goal. His goal is, notice that this is a noun form because you can use aim as a verb, but in this case it isn't because we have a possessive. His aim. So this as a subject would be it. His aim, it. His goal, it. His aim is, this is your verb, so subject, verb. His aim is to diversify the kingdom away from its dependence on oil revenues. So right now, oil revenues, so revenue, that the money coming from oil. So to diversify, you need different things. So you can still have oil, but you need to add other revenue sources. So to diversify, very common business term, economic term. And now notice the preposition is away from its dependence on oil revenue. So here, dependence, of course, that means that the country depends on. So that comes from the verb depend. Its dependence, that's the noun form. You still use the preposition on oil revenues and create vibrant, modern, domestic industries. So here we have domestic industries. Domestic is an adjective that describes the industries, but then we have modern, which now describes domestic industries. And then we have vibrant that also describes the domestic industries that will provide meaningful jobs for the hundreds of thousands. So not just thousands, hundreds of thousands of graduates. So notice, hundreds, S, of thousands of graduates. So plural, 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 plural. And school leavers. A school leaver, this is a person who leaves school. To be honest, it's not that common of a term. And if you leave school, generally you would do so because you have a certification, which would represent graduate. So I'm not too sure why they included this. However, it's just simply someone who leaves school. But the common term is a graduate. Thousands of graduates and school leavers pouring into the job market each year. So pouring into, just entering into in a large quantity. Just like if the rain is pouring, large quantity. So you can use this if maybe on Black Friday, people pour into a store. So they enter the store in large volume. So pour into the job market each year. It's just a more emphatic way of saying enter the job market each year. Part of Vision 2030, remember this is the course, their plan that they're embarking on, because we use embark on to mean begin in a more emphatic way. Part of Vision 2030 involves attracting foreign investment because remember, they want to diversify their revenue. Part of it also involves building things like data centers that are vulnerable to attack. If something is vulnerable to attack, it means that they are either attacked more frequently than other things. So a data center is just more of a target than perhaps a medical clinic. I'm just using that off the top of my head. So they receive more attacks, or it can also mean at the same time that one attack can cause more damage because of all the technology there. That one small attack can be very severe in consequence. Let's keep reading. This is not going to work. So remember I said you always have to look back to see who it, they, he, she, what it represents. You have to do the same thing for this or that. So you have to look back at the last thing. So involves attracting foreign investment or even building things like data centers, because technically this is a singular. So it would relate back to the last thing mentioned, which would be building things like data center. But I have a feeling that this means all of the goal of Vision 2030. This is not going to work if Saudi Arabia finds itself under an enduring long-term threat from drones fired across its southern border by the Houthis in Yemen, or ballistic missiles fired directly by Iran. So their plan, Vision 2030, won't succeed, isn't going to work, won't succeed. Now here, again, we have the use of adjectives, which are important. They give more information, of course. So we have a threat. Threat is the noun, a threat. So a potential risk or a potential problem, a potential attack, that would be threat, a threat. But then you have to take your article and you have to match it with what comes next. So here we have the adjective, not the noun. And it's based on the sound, not spelling. But often the spelling is the same. So if you have a vowel sound, which often is spelled with a vowel, then you need an. And enduring. So if something is enduring, it means it continues for a long time. And then long term also means for a long time. But long term is just more based on the actual time. And enduring means that during that long time, every single day or every single week, you have attacks. So they communicate the same idea, but different aspects of time. So this is an area where having that deep understanding of vocabulary can be helpful, because you might be taught that these are synonyms, and they are very closely related, but they have distinct usage. And that's why they can both be used here without being repetitive. Let's keep reading. In 2022, Saudi Arabia agreed to an uneasy truce. A truce is where two people agree to stop fighting, stop being in conflict. It doesn't necessarily have to be a war in terms of physical fighting. It can be more you and your coworker. Let's say you work in a sales position and you compete against each other for the same group of clients. You might agree to a truce where you stop competing and instead you divide the clients evenly, for example. So it can absolutely be used in situations outside of physical conflict, such as a war. Saudi Arabia agreed to, you can agree to agree to a truce. Usually in North America, two people would shake hands and literally say truce. That's how we would agree to a truce. Females would do this as well. Agree to an uneasy truce. Uneasy means that as they're shaking hands or signing a document, they know that it's probably not going to work or it's not a good idea. So uneasy. You have feelings of fear or anxiety in you. You know, when you get those goosebumps or the hairs on the back of your neck, if you're walking late at night in a dark alley, at least if you're a woman, well, that's uneasy. You feel like something bad could happen. So an uneasy truce with the Houthis, and there were reports of payoffs. So remember, we saw this already, of payoffs. But we saw it as the verb form, to pay off. So let's go back, because I don't exactly remember where that was. Here, by paying off some of their adversaries. So that's how they were going to de-escalate the situation, make it less severe. Pay off. Literally here, we will give you money, just stop attacking us. So that would be paying off, to give them money. But this is the phrasal verb, to pay off. What I just read is a noun form of payoffs. So it's just the thing. It represents the situation where someone is paid money to stop doing something or to start doing something. Of payoffs. So there were reports of payoffs. Reports of means people said that it happened, but it hasn't been verified as truth, as fact. And there were reports of payoffs. But now the richest country in the region, Saudi Arabia, so Saudi Arabia is the richest country in the region, is once more facing the threat of attacks. So is once again, for another time. So they faced the threat of attack in the past, and now it's happening again. So notice our same collocation. You can face a dilemma. You can also face a threat. And that's the end of the article. So now I'll read the article from start to finish, and you can focus on my pronunciation. Saudi Arabia faces a dilemma as it gets dragged into a war it has desperately tried to avoid. Saudi Arabia is facing a difficult dilemma. Ever since the US and Israel launched their war on Iran on February 28th, the Saudis have largely tried to stay out of it. But now, after being attacked from 3 sides, the Saudis have had enough. This week, they carried out joint strikes with the US on Iranian proxy militias in Iraq, who they believe have been launching drones at the kingdom. For Saudi Arabia, the dilemma now is whether to keep on hitting back as a deterrent or whether to try to de-escalate the situation, perhaps by paying off some of their adversaries. There are a number of reasons why Saudi Arabia is trying not to get sucked into a full-scale conflict. Its de facto ruler, the relatively young Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, has embarked the country on a course known as Vision 2030. His aim is to diversify the kingdom away from its dependence on oil revenues and create vibrant, modern domestic industries that will provide meaningful jobs for the hundreds of thousands of graduates and school leavers pouring into the job market each year. Part of Vision 2030 involves attracting foreign investment. Part of it also involves building things like data centers that are vulnerable to attack. This is not going to work if Saudi Arabia finds itself under an enduring, long-term threat from drones fired across its southern border by the Houthis in Yemen or ballistic missiles fired directly by Iran. In 2022, Saudi Arabia agreed to an uneasy truce with the Houthis, and there were reports of payoffs. But now the richest country in the region, Saudi Arabia, is once more facing the threat of attacks.
Do you want to keep learning English with current events? If you do, put yes, 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 put yes, yes, yes in the comments below. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And here's another lesson I know you'll love. Watch it now.